In the original timeline, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn discovered 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine, recognizing his extraordinary force potential and freeing him through a pod race. In this alternate history, Qui-Gon and Queen Amidala still land on Tatooine, but leave without realizing the young slave in Watto's shop is the vergence in the force they need. Anakin remains on Tatooine, his dream of leaving deferred. The strangers who briefly crossed his path are gone, and his hope fades beneath the weight of servitude. The galaxy remains unaware of the powerful child left behind, and the course of the Republic and the Jedi Order will change without him. The Bunta Eve pod race, Qui-Gon Jinn still discovers 9-year-old Anakin's extraordinary force potential on Tatooine. However, in this timeline, Anakin loses the pod race, or at least fails to secure the decisive victory that won his freedom in the original history. Qui-Gon's gambit to win the parts for Queen Amidala's starship falls through. With Anakin never freed from slavery, the Jedi and Padmé's entourage must find another way off-world. They hastily barter and scrape together funds, trading the Queen's royal starship accessories and calling in favors to purchase the needed hyperdrive parts from Watto. This process delays their departure, and Anakin remains behind with his mother Shmi, watching the strangers leave without him. The prolonged stay on Tatooine gives Darth Sidious's agent, Darth Maul, time to pinpoint the Queen's location. Maul ambushes Qui-Gon and the group in Mos Espa just as they prepare to depart. A fierce duel erupts in the dusty streets. Qui-Gon holds off Maul long enough for Padmé Amidala, in disguise, and the others to flee to the ship. The Jedi Master manages a narrow escape onto the departing Nubian cruiser, though he is battered from the encounter. Anakin, still in Watto's care, witnesses the red-bladed Sith engaging Qui-Gon from afar, but cannot intervene. He never leaves Tatooine as the ship blasts off carrying the off-worlders to Coruscant. As Padmé Amidala returned to her homeworld of Naboo, the situation grew more dire. With the Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and their Gungan allies, she led the charge to free the planet from the Trade Federation's occupation. The battle plan mirrored the original, with the Gungan forces luring out the droid army, Padmé's strike team infiltrating Theed Palace to capture Viceroy Gunray, and the Naboo pilots preparing to attack the Trade Federation's droid control ship in orbit. However, this time, there would be no miraculous twist of fate. In the original timeline, Anakin Skywalker had accidentally piloted a starfighter into the control ship's hangar, causing a chain reaction that led to the destruction of the droid control ship, the Vutun Palaya, disabling the droid army and changing the course of the battle. But without Anakin, the Naboo pilots' efforts fell short. Despite their valiant attempts, they failed to breach the Lucrehulk control ship's shields, and no lucky chain reaction resulted in its destruction. The droid army remained intact, still fully operational on the surface. Despite the failed efforts in space, Amidala's team succeeded in capturing Viceroy Nute Gunray within the palace throne room, much like in the original timeline. But their victory was fleeting. Without the destruction of the droid control ship, the battle on the ground turned dire. The Gungan army, lacking the sudden reprieve from the droid shutdown, was overwhelmed and routed on the plains. As the droids pushed back into Theed, Padmé and her forces found themselves cut off and surrounded in the palace. With no hope of retreat, the confrontation shifted from a potential victory to a desperate stalemate. Padmé refused to surrender, even as B-1 battle droids flooded the palace halls. But despite their best efforts, the Queen's forces were ultimately overpowered, and the Trade Federation's forces captured Queen Amidala and her loyalists, sealing Naboo's fate under occupation. Meanwhile, in the Plasma Refinery Complex, the battle between the Jedi and Darth Maul reached its tragic climax. Though Qui-Gon Jinn was fatigued from the earlier skirmish on Tatooine, he fought fiercely against Maul, but ultimately, the Sith Lord mortally wounded the Jedi Master. The fight continued, and in an act of pure rage and determination, Obi-Wan Kenobi struck down Maul, cleaving him in two. The Sith fell into the reactor shaft, presumed dead. The victory came at a heavy cost. Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi who had believed in Anakin's potential, succumbed to his wounds. Obi-Wan, now a knight, faced a somber funeral for his fallen master. But the grief was not the only weight on Obi-Wan's shoulders. With no Anakin to train and the Jedi Council never resuming their debate on the Chosen One, the galaxy's fate grew even more uncertain. Naboo, still under enemy occupation, had no liberators in sight, and the aftermath was far bleaker than in the original timeline. With the failure of the battle and the capture of Queen Amidala, Padmé was left with little choice. The Trade Federation, desperate to legitimize their invasion, forced her to sign a treaty formalizing their occupation of Naboo. This was the very outcome she had fought so hard to prevent in the original timeline. Viceroy Gunray, eager to make the invasion official, stood over her with a blaster pointed at her, coercing the young queen into compliance. Despite signing the document, Padmé made it clear to any witnesses that the action was taken under duress. However, the Trade Federation had their victory. They broadcast the treaty across the galaxy as propaganda, declaring that Naboo had willingly submitted to their rule. Naboo's plight deepened, its people now hostages under Federation control. The galaxy learned that Naboo had fallen completely under the Federation's occupation, a scenario Darth Sidious had orchestrated from the shadows. The news of Naboo's subjugation sent ripples throughout the Galactic Senate, but it was the political vacuum left by Padmé's capture that would fuel Palpatine's rise. Before her capture, Padmé had managed to call for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, a move manipulated by Sidious to further his agenda. In Padmé's absence, the process continued as planned. Seizing on the growing sympathy for his homeworld suffering, Senator Palpatine of Naboo presented himself as the champion of Naboo's cause. He promised the galaxy that he would rescue his planet from the Trade Federation's grasp. The absence of the Queen, who could no longer personally advocate for Naboo, only increased the Senate's sense of urgency. Palpatine, now the figure of hope, exploited the crisis and orchestrated his own rise to power. Once inaugurated as Supreme Chancellor, Palpatine quickly began to delay any decisive action by the Republic, allowing the Federation to solidify their hold on Naboo. By the end of 32 BBY, Palpatine was firmly in control of the Republic, while his alter ego, Darth Sidious, strengthened his grip on Naboo, a key planet for his plans. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council, still reeling from Qui-Gon's report of a Sith adversary and the failed battle on Naboo, was left troubled. They had confirmed that the Sith were indeed active, but they remained unaware that the Sith Master was, in fact, already among them. The next few years saw Naboo endure a prolonged and harsh occupation. Queen Amidala remained a prisoner of the Trade Federation for months following the Battle of Naboo. During this time, Nute Gunray and his allies tightened their grip on the planet, plundering resources and imposing martial law. The humanitarian crisis on Naboo garnered widespread attention across the galaxy, but despite the public outcry, no Republic military intervention came to relieve the suffering. Chancellor Palpatine publicly condemned the occupation, but strangely, no Republic armed force was mobilized to expel the Federation. Under the Republic's disarmament laws and bureaucratic gridlock, Naboo's pleas were buried in committee. In truth, Sidious allowed the occupation to continue, fueling chaos and setting the stage for future military expansion. Eventually, in 30 BBY, Padmé Amidala was rescued in a daring operation. A covert Jedi task force led by Obi-Wan Kenobi alongside Naboo resistance fighters infiltrated Theed and freed the Queen and her entourage. This covert mission was not widely publicized to avoid acknowledging the Senate's inaction, but it marked Amidala's escape from Naboo. However, Gunray's droid garrison remained on the planet, and the Trade Federation continued to administratively control Naboo through a puppet governor. Though Queen Amidala became an outspoken voice in the Senate, the people of Naboo were still effectively living under occupation. Their world remained in limbo, liberated from one form of control, but still held by another. This untenable situation sowed the first seeds of doubt in the minds of Republic citizens about their government's ability to protect them. Within the Jedi Order, the death of Qui-Gon Jinn and the failed liberation of Naboo triggered a profound schism. Count Dooku, once Qui-Gon's mentor, was disgusted by the Senate's corruption and the Jedi Council's inability to prevent Naboo's suffering. In 32 BBY, shortly after Qui-Gon's funeral, Dooku made the shocking decision to leave the Jedi Order. Publicly, he cited his growing disillusionment with the Republic's politics and the Jedi's ineffectiveness. But in secret, Dooku was seduced by Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord, impressed by Dooku's influence and resources, recruited him as his new apprentice to replace the fallen Darth Maul. Dooku took on the Sith mantle of Darth Tyrannus while presenting himself to the galaxy as a political idealist. Over the next several years, Dooku used his aristocratic status and charismatic personality to unite thousands of star systems in protest of the Republic's corruption. By 24 BBY, this movement coalesced into the Confederacy of Independent Systems, CIS, a separatist alliance demanding the right to secede. Disillusioned worlds, including those affected by the Naboo crisis, flocked to Dooku's cause. Thousands of systems seceded from the Republic, sparking what would later be known as the Separatist Crisis. Palpatine feigned efforts at reconciliation, all while secretly encouraging Dooku's secession, for a divided galaxy played right into his hands. As the Republic continued to fracture, Sidious's true plans came into clearer focus. He was manipulating both sides, using the growing turmoil to cement his control over the galaxy. In the wake of the Naboo disaster, many senators grew convinced that the Republic needed a standing army to prevent such a catastrophic failure from happening again. Padmé Amidala, now serving as Naboo's senator after her term as queen, ironically found herself leading a pacifist faction that opposed militarization. Despite her efforts, the chorus of voices demanding security grew louder as the separatist movement gained strength across the galaxy. Unbeknownst to the public, Chancellor Palpatine had already set a solution in motion. In 32 BBY, the rogue Jedi Master Sifo Dyas had secretly commissioned the creation of a grand clone army on the remote planet Kamino. Over the next decade, the clone troopers grew and trained in complete secrecy, intended to be Palpatine's ultimate trump card. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued its public debate over the Military Creation Act, unaware that the very army they discussed was already being formed. By 28 BBY, tensions were on the rise as sporadic skirmishes broke out on the Republic's fringes, with loyalist and separatist factions clashing in battles involving local defense forces and Trade Federation droid security. The galaxy edged ever closer to open war, setting the stage for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. Meanwhile, on the remote world of Tatooine, Anakin Skywalker continued his life as a slave through his adolescence. After his loss in the Boonta Eve Podrace, Watto, the Toydarian junk dealer, kept Anakin as an asset, with the boy's mechanical talents proving valuable to Watto's shop. However, Watto's fortunes began to decline over the years, and in 26 BBY, Anakin's mother, Shmi Skywalker, caught the attention of a moisture farmer named Cliegg Lars. Cliegg, who had long wanted to free Shmi, purchased her from Watto, securing her freedom and marrying her shortly afterward. However, Cliegg couldn't afford to buy Anakin as well. Watto, perhaps out of spite or greed, set an exorbitant price on the skilled teenager. Shmi was left with a heartbreaking choice: freedom with Cliegg or remaining enslaved with her son. Anakin, now 13 years old, urged his mother to take the opportunity for a better life. Reluctantly, Shmi left with Cliegg, relocating to the Lars homestead near Anchorhead, where she became a loving stepmother to Cliegg's son, Owen Lars. Anakin, left behind in Mos Espa under Watto's ownership, felt a deep heartbreak, but found solace knowing that his mother was no longer in chains. The separation marked a painful chapter in his life, one that would influence his path for years to come. In the years that followed, Anakin Skywalker endured a life of isolation and hardship. He toiled in Watto's junkyard by day, repairing starships and droids, his mechanical talents always in demand. Occasionally, Watto allowed him to participate in local podraces, hoping to cash in on Anakin's natural abilities. Anakin's innate force sensitivity made him an instinctive pilot, quickly earning a reputation in Tatooine's racing circuits. Yet, despite his talent, he remained a slave, unable to truly capitalize on his abilities or escape his circumstances. Whenever Watto permitted, Anakin would visit the Lars homestead, maintaining a strong bond with his mother, Shmi. These visits gave Anakin a rare taste of what normal family life could be, something he longed for. He befriended his stepbrother Owen and Owen's girlfriend, Beru Whitesun, finding comfort in their company. But deep down, Anakin yearned for something more: freedom. He quietly resented the Republic for abandoning him, and the Jedi's failure to return weighed heavily on his heart. He clung to Qui-Gon's unfulfilled promise that he would come back to free you, a promise that never materialized. Unbeknownst to Anakin, the Jedi Council was aware of Qui-Gon's belief that Anakin was the prophesied Chosen One. After the Naboo mission, however, they made no further attempt to retrieve the boy. Yoda and the Council, wary of Anakin's age and the dark path they foresaw, decided to leave him on Tatooine. As a result, Anakin grew up on the fringes of galactic events, a skilled mechanic with untapped Force potential, but a heart full of dreams deferred. By 22 BBY, Count Dooku's Separatist alliance had become an open threat to the Republic. When Dooku convened a council of Separatist leaders on Geonosis, Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi, following Jango Fett's trail, discovered the Separatists were manufacturing a massive droid army. Obi-Wan transmitted this crucial information back to Coruscant. The Republic, now facing a direct challenge, mounted a rescue mission led by Jedi Master Mace Windu, accompanied by 200 Jedi. The first battle of Geonosis unfolded much as it did in the original timeline, with one significant difference. Senator Padmé Amidala was not present in the Geonosian arena. In the original timeline, Padmé accompanied Anakin to save Obi-Wan and found herself fighting for her life in the arena. In this alternate history, without Anakin to champion her cause, Padmé remained on Coruscant, focusing on the political crisis. As a result, the Jedi alone led the charge to free Obi-Wan. Though they succeeded, the battle was fierce, and many Jedi perished at the hands of the overwhelming battle droid forces. At the last moment, Yoda arrived with the newly discovered clone army, rescuing the survivors. It was on that day that the Clone Wars officially began. By 22 BBY, Padmé had become a prominent senator, leading the opposition against Palpatine's emergency powers. She voted against the deployment of the clone army, though the Senate authorized it in her absence, a clever maneuver by Palpatine, who arranged for her to be off-world during the crucial vote, just as he did in the canon timeline. She watched with sorrow as war broke out and immediately worked alongside Senators Bail Organa and Mon Mothma to form a loyalist committee. Their goal was to ensure the Chancellor did not overstep his newfound powers. As the war raged on, Padmé became increasingly suspicious of Palpatine's intentions, particularly given Naboo's unresolved occupation and the now full-scale war that granted him supreme authority. As the Clone Wars raged across the galaxy, Anakin Skywalker's conspicuous absence shifted the balance of the conflict in subtle yet significant ways. In the original timeline, Anakin, known as the hero with no fear, won many key battles for the Republic, relying on his daring tactics and instinctive piloting to save his fellow Jedi and turn the tide of war. But without him, the clone army was forced to rely on other generals. Jedi like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Aayla Secura, and Mace Windu stepped up, leading clone troops through one campaign after another. They achieved victories, but often at a higher cost. For instance, during the Battle of Christophsis in 21 BBY, Obi-Wan and Captain Rex secured a win, but it came with significant losses. Anakin's absence meant there was no one to break the Separatist blockade with his usual reckless genius. On Ryloth, Mace Windu's leadership helped free Cham Syndulla's Twi'lek resistance, but without Anakin's improvisational strategies and Ahsoka Tano, who never became Anakin's Padawan in this timeline, the campaign dragged on longer than in the original history. Anakin's absence also affected numerous other missions he would have led, such as rescuing Jabba, the Hutt's son Rada, and defending Felucia. These missions were often taken over by alternate Jedi teams, or in some cases left undone. resulting in worlds like Felucia falling under Separatist control for longer periods than in canon. The Clone Wars became a grinding conflict of attrition, with the Republic often on the defensive. Without Anakin to turn the tide with his sheer will and skill, the Republic found itself losing ground, especially in the Outer Rim. Count Dooku's Separatists made significant gains, and General Grievous emerged as an even greater threat. In one early raid, Grievous managed to assassinate Jedi Master Eth Koth during a space battle, a loss that might have been prevented if Anakin had been there to lead the fight. This loss emboldened the Separatists, pushing the war into darker territory. In response, the Jedi generals began to coordinate more closely, compensating for Anakin's absence with teamwork. The Republic also turned to technology, rushing out new weapons like experimental ray shields and upgraded ATTE walkers to counter Separatist advantages. ARC troopers and clone commandos played larger roles in special ops that would have typically been handled by Anakin or Obi-Wan personally. The war, without Anakin's presence on the front lines, became a much slower and more methodical struggle. As the war continued, Chancellor Palpatine's power steadily grew. Though he still manipulated the events of the war from behind the scenes, he found it slightly harder to influence the Jedi without Anakin as his prized pawn. In the original timeline, Palpatine had nurtured a close friendship with Anakin, using him as a personal informant within the Jedi Order. However, in this timeline, Palpatine lacked such a direct connection to the Jedi Council, which forced him to turn to other means to maintain control. He expanded the office of the Supreme Chancellor, placing loyalists like Mas Amedda and Satay Pistage in key positions, ensuring his influence over the Senate remained unchallenged. The Jedi Council, growing uneasy, began to scrutinize Palpatine's actions more closely as he pushed increasingly restrictive security measures. By the midpoint of the war, around 20 BBY, Master Yoda and Master Windu began to openly discuss their distrust of Palpatine, suspecting that he might not step down after the war ended. They also continued to puzzle over the mysterious Sith Master responsible for the invasion of Naboo, unaware that Palpatine himself was Darth Sidious. Without Anakin's inside knowledge, the Jedi were blind to the true nature of the Chancellor. Nevertheless, they began to surveil Palpatine more closely than in the original timeline, quietly sowing the seeds for a direct confrontation in the years to come. In 22 BBY, an important and deeply personal event unfolds on Tatooine. Shmi Skywalker Lars, Anakin's mother, is kidnapped by Tusken Raiders, just as in the original timeline. However, in this alternate history, Anakin is already on Tatooine, living with the Lars family when the raid occurs. In a panic-driven fury, 19-year-old Anakin defies Klieg's warning to stay behind and sets off alone to rescue his mother. He taps into his long-suppressed Force abilities, using them to track the Tuskens to their encampment under the cover of night. In a scene mirroring his canonical actions, Anakin slaughters the Tusken Raiders in a violent outburst of rage, cutting down the warriors, women, and even children in the camp. This time, however, Anakin reaches Shmi in time. Though gravely injured from the torture she endured, she is still alive. Anakin carries her back to the Lars homestead, where Shmi eventually recovers, thanks to the care and support of Klieg, Owen, and Beru. This experience becomes a pivotal turning point for Anakin. On one hand, he fulfills the promise he made to his younger self to free his mother, something that prevents the crushing guilt he would have felt had he arrived too late, as he did in the original timeline. On the other hand, the massacre of the Tusken tribe exposes a terrifying anger within him, an anger that unsettles him as much as it frightens him. Anakin chooses not to tell anyone the full extent of what happened that night. The Lars family believes he only fought off those guarding Shmi. However, Shmi, with her deep connection to her son, senses the darkness in his heart. With gentle wisdom, she comforts Anakin, urging him to let go of the hate that threatens to consume him. In the end, Shmi survives, and her presence remains a calming influence on Anakin, steering him away from the edge of his darker impulses. Anakin, having finally escaped Watto's grasp, decides to stay on the moisture farm with his mother and the Lars family. Impressed by Anakin's dedication and hard work, Klieg Lars purchases Anakin's freedom from Watto, who, now financially ruined, sells Anakin for a modest sum. By the late Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker is a free man, living quietly as a moisture farmer and mechanic in Beggar's Canyon, far removed from the turmoil of galactic war. The wider galaxy and the Jedi Order remain unaware of his existence, and Anakin remains simply an extraordinarily talented pilot on Tatooine, never the prophesied Jedi savior. As the Clone Wars entered their third year in 19 BBY, the Republic began to gain the upper hand. Thanks to internal attrition among the Separatists and Palpatine's careful manipulation, the droid armies started to falter. General Grievous was driven into hiding, and several Separatist strongholds fell back under Republic control. Sensing the endgame was near, Palpatine set his final plans into motion. In the original timeline, Palpatine orchestrated his own kidnapping, using Anakin Skywalker as his instrument to turn the Jedi against Count Dooku. In this alternate timeline, however, with Anakin out of the picture, Palpatine knew that such a plan would be unreliable. Instead, Sidious devised a more subtle trap. Palpatine leaked intelligence that led Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi to locate General Grievous on the planet Utapau. Obi-Wan engaged the cyborg general in combat, ultimately defeating him and delivering a major blow to the Separatists. Grievous's death, however, played directly into Palpatine's hands. Seizing the opportunity, the Chancellor declared that the Jedi were no longer necessary to lead the Republic's war effort. He subtly implied that the Jedi might even be hindering peace negotiations and suggested they step aside for the good of the galaxy. With these actions, Palpatine set the stage to further consolidate his power, using Grievous's defeat to undermine the Jedi's position. The Council, sensing that Palpatine might now seek to marginalize them, if not worse, made a fateful decision. If tangible evidence of Palpatine's dark affiliations emerged, they would have no choice but to move against him preemptively before his control over the Republic was absolute. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of the galaxy. As the Clone Wars neared their conclusion, Count Dooku became increasingly paranoid. With General Grievous defeated and the Separatist Council relocated to Mustafar, Dooku saw the writing on the wall. His usefulness to Palpatine seemed to be coming to an end. The loss of Grievous, a key military leader, was a significant blow, but Dooku also noticed that Palpatine was cutting off other loose ends, consolidating power in ways that made him increasingly dispensable. In the shadow of these developments, Dooku feared that Sidious might eventually discard him, just as he had done with Grievous. In a desperate bid to maintain his own power, Dooku decided to take matters into his own hands. Instead of waiting to be cast aside, he made a bold move. He betrayed his Sith master. Using his connections within the galaxy, Dooku secretly transmitted a message to the Jedi Temple, revealing the truth about Chancellor Palpatine's true identity as Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord behind the entire war. Dooku's message, however, was not purely altruistic. While he hoped to spur the Jedi into action and eliminate Sidious, he also saw an opportunity to take control of the Separatists. In his eyes, if the Jedi dealt with Palpatine, he could seize the reins of the Confederacy, either through force or diplomacy, and claim his place as the rightful leader. His message was calculated, self-serving as much as it was a desperate plea for survival. The Jedi Council was initially stunned by Dooku's revelation, but quickly began validating parts of his claim, confirming many of their own suspicions about the Chancellor's involvement with the Sith. The Jedi, now aware of the magnitude of the threat, moved swiftly. Mace Windu, trusting the evidence and the Council's judgment, gathered a team of 4 Jedi Masters and prepared to march to the Chancellor's office to arrest Palpatine for treason and Sith conspiracy. What had once been a mere suspicion was now an undeniable truth, and the galaxy was on the cusp of a confrontation that would shake its very foundations. Mace Windu, accompanied by Jedi Masters Kit Fisto, Cece Teen, and Agen Kolar, made their way to Chancellor Palpatine's private quarters on Coruscant. The time for confrontation had come, with Dooku's revelation confirming Palpatine's true identity as Darth Sidious. The Jedi were now determined to end the Sith's influence once and for all. What ensued was a fierce and brutal lightsaber duel between the Jedi and the Dark Lord. Sidious, revealed in his true persona, fought with an overwhelming speed and ferocity. His crimson blade clashed against the Jedi Masters, cutting down 3 of them, Fisto, Teen, and Kolar, within moments, using his mastery of the Force and his signature lightning to decimate them. But Mace Windu proved to be Sidious's equal. Channeling the dark side's fury through his Vapad fighting style, Windu fought with precision and determination, never succumbing to the same darkness he wielded. The duel escalated, with each blow more intense than the last. Sidious, desperate to maintain control, unleashed a torrent of Sith lightning, but Windu stood his ground. Despite the lightning scorched his face and charred his arm, the Karun Master held firm, deflecting the attacks with his lightsaber. At the critical moment, with no Anakin Skywalker to intervene, Windu pressed his advantage. In one swift stroke, he struck down Darth Sidious, killing the Sith Lord in the very heart of the Republic. The mastermind of the Clone Wars, the puppet master behind the Republic's collapse, was finally eliminated. With Palpatine's death, chaos erupted within the Senate building. His Senate aides and the Red Guard, who had witnessed the confrontation, scrambled to react. Palpatine's loyalists, Mazameta, Sly Moore, and others quickly branded the Jedi as assassins and sent emergency signals to clone commanders across Coruscant to attack the Jedi on sight. However, the infamous contingency order, Order 66, was never officially issued. Only Palpatine held the authority and codes to trigger the inhibitor chips across the entire clone army. In the absence of Palpatine's direct command, confusion reigned. Some clone units, acting on ad hoc directives from Palpatine's aides, turned on nearby Jedi, out of instinct, misunderstanding, or individual orders from their superiors. Other clone troopers, however, received no clear orders and remained loyal to their Jedi generals, leading to a fragmented and ineffective purge. On Coruscant, a group of shock troopers attempted to storm the Jedi Temple, but without the 501st Legion under Darth Vader's command, they faced heavy resistance. The temple's automated defenses and the Jedi Temple guards held off the attack long enough for most of the Jedi younglings and Padawans to evacuate through secret passages. While some Jedi across the galaxy fell in skirmishes, such as the sudden deaths of Jedi like Stas Ali and Ki-Adi-Mundi, who were betrayed by clone commanders acting on suspicion, the initial purge was not as complete or widespread as in the original timeline. Though wounded, the Jedi Order survived the first wave of chaos. On Coruscant, the temple held, and many Jedi managed to escape the initial bloodshed. The fragmented purge allowed the survivors a glimmer of hope as they reorganized and planned for the future, knowing the Republic was gone, but the fight for survival was not over. With the death of Chancellor Palpatine, the galaxy plunged into its final convulsions of war. On the Separatist side, Count Dooku's desperate gambit to have the Jedi eliminate Sidious did not save him. Immediately following Palpatine's demise, the Republic forces, freed from Sidious's manipulations, launched their final offensives to capture the remaining Separatist leadership. Dooku, attempting to assert control, found himself isolated. Sidious, ever the manipulator, had anticipated his apprentice's betrayal. On Mustafar, where the Separatist leadership had been hiding, Sidious had previously issued a contingency order. Whether executed by General Grievous or Sidious's royal guards via coded signals, the Separatist Council was marked for extermination. With Grievous dead and Sidious gone, Dooku's power was quickly diminishing. Some Separatist worlds, hearing of Palpatine's death and sensing the war's futility, chose to lay down their arms. On Mustafar, Dooku was confronted by Jedi Masters Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, who, tracking him through the Force, found him attempting to flee his inevitable downfall. In a brief but intense duel, Dooku was overpowered and taken into custody. The combined efforts of Obi-Wan and Yoda were enough to defeat Dooku. Together, they succeeded where they might have failed alone. With Dooku captured and the Separatist droid armies shutting down after his reluctant ceasefire, the Clone Wars ended abruptly. The Republic, no longer under Sith manipulation, declared an armistice in mid-19 BBY. After years of war, the galaxy fell into a tentative peace. Though bloodied, the Jedi Order survives the attempted purge. Grandmaster Yoda mourns the loss of many knights and masters in the chaos of the Clone Wars' final days, yet the heart of the Order endures. The Jedi reassemble at the temple, which stands largely intact despite being lightly damaged from the clone assault. Rather than retreating into hiding, the surviving 5,000 Jedi return to their role as guardians of peace in the post-war Republic. The Order engages in deep introspection. They recognize how Darth Sidious clouded their judgment and manipulated their path, leading them astray. In light of these revelations, the Jedi vow to reform certain practices, including becoming more attuned to political deceit, and perhaps allowing greater personal freedom to prevent further Sith manipulation. In honor of Mace Windu's bravery in defeating Sidious, the Council erects a monument in the temple, ensuring his legacy remains etched in the Order's history. Yoda continues to serve as a mentor, guiding a new generation of Jedi who will learn from the mistakes of the past. Obi-Wan Kenobi, acclaimed for his role in capturing Dooku and ending the war, rises to become a leading member of the Jedi Council. His reputation as the negotiator solidifies his place as one of the Order's greatest defenders, heralding a time of peace and renewal. Under Chancellor Bail Organa's leadership, the Republic enters a period of reconciliation. The worlds that seceded during the war are invited back into the Republic under fair terms. Many accept, conditioned on amnesty and political reforms. The corporatist interests that back Dooku, the Trade Federation, the Commerce Guild, and others are dismantled or nationalized. One of the most significant victories is the liberation of Naboo. Newt Gunray, caught attempting to flee Coruscant after Sidious's fall, is arrested, and the Trade Federation's occupation collapses with the exposure of their role in Sidious's machinations. Senator Padmé Amidala returns to Naboo to a hero's welcome as the droid armies withdraw and the rightful government is restored. For the first time in years, Naboo is free from occupation, and Padmé's leadership is celebrated across the galaxy. Across the galaxy, the sense of relief is palpable. While there will be challenges ahead, war recovery, lingering separatist holdouts, and rogue remnants of Palpatine's regime, the central crisis of the era is resolved. The Galactic Republic, having avoided the fate of becoming a tyrannical empire, endures. In time, the Senate enacts the Organa Amendments, instituting term limits and anti-corruption measures to ensure no future chancellor can accumulate the power Palpatine once held. The galaxy, though scarred, looks toward a new era of rebuilding, reform, and hope. The Sith are gone, the Republic remains intact, and a more just and vigilant order emerges from the ashes of war. In this timeline, Anakin Skywalker never becomes a Jedi nor a Sith. Instead, he lives out his days on Tatooine in relative obscurity, far removed from the galactic chaos. After the Clone Wars, Anakin remains at the Lars Moisture Farm, helping Owen Lars manage the family business. With Shmi alive and content in her later years, Anakin's family bonds keep him grounded, offering him a sense of peace that eluded him in another reality. Though Anakin occasionally reflects on the possibilities of what could have been, his potential as a Jedi, or the great pilot he could have become, he also sees the turbulent galaxy from afar. Anakin is quietly thankful he was spared its trials, understanding that his gifts, while extraordinary, were never meant to be shaped by the violence and conflict of the larger galaxy. In his 20s, Anakin finds fame as one of the Outer Rim's most renowned podracers. His skills on the track bring him glory, and after a decade-long wait, he wins the Boonta Eve Classic in a triumphant comeback, racing as a free man. His victory marks a turning point in his life. He uses his winnings to buy the freedom of several other slaves on Tatooine, continuing the compassion his mother, Shmi, instilled in him. Anakin, however, never succumbs to the darkness. The name Darth Vader never emerges, and instead, Anakin's legacy is defined by the line of kind, mechanically gifted Skywalkers who remain on Tatooine. Padmé Amidala continues to serve as Naboo's senator until the end of the Clone Wars. Having played a crucial role in exposing Palpatine's true nature and saving the Republic, she earns the respect of her peers and becomes one of the Republic's most influential statespersons. After the war, Padmé becomes one of the key architects of the Republic's Reconstruction Act, helping to rebuild the galaxy after years of destruction. She also serves as a founding member of the Senatorial Reform Committee, pushing for lasting reforms to prevent corruption and abuse of power. Padmé never experiences the personal tragedies that she once feared. Without Anakin's fall to the dark side or the burden of a secret pregnancy, she is free to dedicate herself to her political career. Her leadership proves invaluable as she eventually succeeds Bail Organa as Chancellor of the Republic about a decade after the war. Elected on a platform of unity, anti-corruption, and hope, Padmé ushers in an era of enlightened leadership. Under her chancellorship, Naboo flourishes, and the Republic enters a period of relative peace and prosperity. Her tenure is marked by a focus on justice, equality, and diplomatic engagement, leading the galaxy toward healing after the scars of war. Padmé's legacy is one of enduring political influence, with her name remembered not for the tragedy she endured, but for the strength she showed in guiding the galaxy into a new era of hope and stability. Obi-Wan Kenobi's life in this timeline is markedly less tragic than in the original history. Without the heartbreak of a former apprentice turning to the dark side, Obi-Wan dedicates himself fully to the Jedi Order's reconstruction. He becomes the primary mentor to many young Jedi, carrying on the teachings of Qui-Gon Jinn and advocating for a deeper understanding of the living force within the Order. Obi-Wan's approach is grounded in the wisdom of balance, nurturing both the traditional Jedi teachings and the insights he gained from his late master's beliefs. Years after the war, Obi-Wan encounters Anakin Skywalker, but only once and by happenstance during a diplomatic visit to Tatooine. In their brief, cordial meeting, Obi-Wan senses Anakin's strong connection to the Force and recognizes no darkness in him. Respecting Anakin's chosen life, Obi-Wan simply thanks him for his contributions to the galaxy without revealing their past connection during the Naboo mission. He leaves Tatooine in peace, content with the knowledge that Anakin's life has taken a different, quieter path than the one originally destined for him. Obi-Wan continues to serve as a senior member of the Jedi Council, guiding and training the next generation of Jedi. His legacy is one of wisdom, patience, and an unwavering commitment to peace, as he ensures that the Jedi Order adapts to the post-war era and remains the guiding force for the galaxy's future.